Good day, Ma'am Kat and classmates. Ma'am J, Ma'am Aryan, and I, Christine, will be discussing about ways on evaluating student performance and learning. How to assess a student's learning and performance. Learning takes place in students' heads where it is invisible to others. This means that learning must be assessed through performance, what students can do with their learning. Assessing students' performance can involve assessments that are formal or informal, high or low stakes, anonymous or public, individual or collective. Here are strategies for assessing student learning and performance, as well as ways to clarify your expectations and performance criteria to students. Creating assignments. Here are some general suggestions and questions to consider when creating assignments. Consider your learning objectives. What do you want students to learn in your course? What could they do that will show you that they have learned it? To determine assignments that truly serve your course objectives, it is useful to write out your objectives in this form. I want my students to be able to use active measurable verbs as you complete that sentence, and your learning objectives will point you towards suitable assignments. Design assignments that are interesting and challenging. This is the fun side of assignment design. Consider how to focus a student's thinking in ways that are creative, challenging, and motivating. Think beyond the conventional assignment type. Double-check alignment. After creating your assignments, go back to your learning objectives and make sure that there is still a good match between what you want students to learn and what you are asking them to do. If you find a mismatch, you will need to adjust either the assignments or the learning objectives. Name assignments accurately. Students can be misled by assignments that are named inappropriately. For example, if you want students to analyze a product's strengths and weaknesses, but you call the assignment a product description, students may focus all their energies on the descriptive, not the critical elements of the task. Thus, it is important to ensure that the titles of your assignments communicate their intention accurately to students. Consider sequencing. Think about how to order your assignments so that they build skills in a logical sequence. Ideally, assignments that require the most synthesis of skills and knowledge should come later in the semester, preceded by smaller assignments that build these skills incrementally. Think about scheduling. Consider your intended assignments in relation to the academic calendar and decide how they can be reasonably spaced throughout the semester, taking into account holidays and key campus events. Consider how long it will take students to complete all parts of the assignment, and be sure to allow sufficient time between assignments. Check feasibility. Is the workload you have in mind reasonable for your students? Is the grading burden manageable for you? Sometimes, there are ways to reduce workload, whether for you or for students, without compromising learning objectives. If your learning objectives are clear, you will see where corners can be cut without sacrificing educational quality. Articulate the task description clearly. If an assignment is vague, students may interpret it any number of ways and not necessarily how you intended. Thus, it is critical to clearly and unambiguously identify the tasks students are to do. It can be helpful to differentiate the central task, what students are supposed to produce, from other advice and information you provide in your assignment description. Establish clear performance criteria. Different instructors apply different criteria when grading students' work, so it's important that you clearly articulate to students what your criteria are. To do so, think about the best students' work you have seen on similar tasks and try to identify the specific characteristics that made it excellent, such as clarity of thought, originality, logical organization, or use of a wide range of sources. Then, identify the characteristics of the worst student's work you have seen, such as shaky evidence, weak organizational structure, or lack of focus. Identifying these characteristics can help you consciously articulate the criteria you already apply. It is important to communicate these criteria to students, whether in your assignment description or as a separate rubric or scoring guide. Clearly articulated performance criteria can prevent unnecessary confusion about your expectations while also setting a high standard for students to meet. Specify the parameters. If you have the specific parameters in mind for the assignment, you should be sure to specify them in your assignment description. Otherwise, students may misapply conventions and formats they learned in other courses that are not appropriate for yours. A checklist for designing assignments. Here is a set of questions you can ask yourself when creating an assignment. Have I provided a written description of the assignment? Specify the purpose of the assignment. Indicated the intended audience. Articulated the instructions in precise and unambiguous language. Provided information about the appropriate format and presentation. Indicated special instructions such as particular citation style or headings. Specify the due date and the consequences for missing it. Articulated performance criteria clearly. Indicated the assignment's point value or percentage of the course grade. Provided students with models or samples. Highlight how the exam aligns with course objectives. Identify which course objectives the exam addresses. This helps students see how the components of the course align, reassures them about their ability to perform well, and activates relevant experiences and knowledge from earlier in the course. Write instructions that are clear, explicit, and unambiguous. Make sure that students know exactly what you want them to do. Be more explicit about your expectations than you may think is necessary. Otherwise, students may make assumptions that run them into trouble. You also might want to explain in your instructions how fully you want students to answer questions. For example, to specify if you want answers to be written in paragraphs or bullet points, or if you want students to show all steps in problem solving. Write instructions that preview the exam. Students' test-taking skills may not be very effective, leading them to use their time poorly during an exam. Instructions can prepare students for what they are about to be asked by previewing the format of the exam, including question type and point value. This helps students use their time more effectively during the exam. Word questions clearly and simply. Avoid complex and convoluted sentence constructions, double negatives, and idiomatic language that may be difficult for students, especially international students, to understand. Also, in multiple choice questions, avoid using absolutes such as never or always, which can lead to confusion. Enlist a colleague or test analyst to read through your exam. Sometimes instruction or questions that seem perfectly clear to you are not as clear as you believe. Thus, it can be a good idea to ask a colleague or test analyst to read through your exam to make sure everything is clear and unambiguous. Think about how long it will take students to complete the exam. When students are under time pressure, they may make mistakes that have nothing to do with the extent of their learning. Thus, unless your goal is to assess how students perform under time pressure, it is important to design exams that can be reasonably completed in the time allotted. One way to determine how long an exam will take students to complete is to take it yourself and allow students triple the time it took you or reduce the length or difficulty of the exam. Consider the point value of different question types. The point value you ascribe to different questions should be in line with their difficulty, as well as the length of time they are likely to take and the importance of the skills they assessed. It is not always easy when you are an expert in the field to determine how difficult a question will be for students, so ask yourself, how many sub-skills are involved? Have students answered questions like this before, or will this be new to them? Are there common traps or misconceptions that students may fall into when answering these questions? Needless to say, difficult and complex question types should be assigned higher point values than easier, simpler question types. Similarly, questions that assess pivotal knowledge and skills should be given higher point values than questions that assess less critical knowledge. Think ahead to how you will score students' work. When assigning point values, it is useful to think ahead to how you will score students' answers. Will you give partial credit if a student gets some elements of an answer right? If so, you might want to break the desired answer into components and decide how many points you would give a student for correctly answering each. Thinking this through in advance can make it considerably easier to assign partial credit when you do the actual grading. For example, if a short answer question involves 4 discrete components, assigning a point value that is divisible by 4 makes grading easier.
Classroom assessment techniques are a set of specific activities that instructor can use to quickly gauge students' comprehension. They are generally used to assess students' understanding of material in the current course, but with minor modifications, they can also be used to gauge students' knowledge coming into a course or program. Classroom assessment techniques are meant to provide immediate feedback about the entire class level of understanding, not individual students. The instructor or teachers can use this feedback to inform instruction, such as speeding up or slowing the pace of a lecture or explicitly addressing areas of confusion. So there are specific types of classroom assessment techniques. First is minute paper. We can pose 1 or 2 questions in which students identify the most significant things they have learned from a given lecture, discussion, or assignment. Second is muddiest point. So this is also similar to the minute paper but focuses on the area of confusion. Third, the problem recognition task. In here, we can identify a set of problems that can be solved most effectively by only one of a few methods that you are teaching in the class. Fourth, it is documented problem solutions. We can choose 1 to 3 problems and ask students to write down all the steps they would take in solving them with an explanation of each step. Consider using this method as an assessment of problem-solving skills at the beginning of the course or as a regular part of the assigned work. Next is directed paraphrasing. Select an important topic, theory, concept, or argument that students have studied in some depth and identify a real audience to whom your students should be able to explain this material in their own words, providing the guidelines about the length and the purpose of the paraphrased explanation. Next is application cards. You can identify a concept or principle your students are studying and ask students to come up with 1 to 3 applications of the principle from everyday experience, current news events, or their knowledge of particular organizations or system discussed in the course or topic. Next is student-generated test questions. A week or 2 prior to an exam, begin to write general guidelines about the kinds of questions you plan to ask on them. And last is the classroom opinion polls. When you believe that your students may have pre-existing opinions about course-related issues or topics that are related, construct a very short 2 to 4 items questionnaire to help uncover students' opinion. And in creating and implementing a classroom assessment techniques, here are some strategies. First, we have to identify a specific accessible questions where the students' responses will influence your teaching and provide feedback to aid their learning. Complete their assessment task yourself to be sure that is doable in the time you will allot for it. Plan how will you analyze students' responses, such as grouping them into the categories like good understanding, some misunderstanding, or significant misunderstanding. Then after using a classroom assessment technique, we can communicate the result to the students so that they know you learned from the assessment and so that they can identify specific difficulties of their own. Next is using concept maps. Concept maps are graphic representations of students' knowledge. Having students create a concept maps can provide you with insights into how they organize and represent knowledge. This can be useful strategy for assessing both the knowledge students and their developing knowledge of the topic. So concept maps includes concepts, usually enclosed in circles or boxes, and relationships between concepts indicates by a connecting line. Words on the line are linking words and specify the relationship between concepts. So I will be showing you a sample of a concept map. So here is a sample of a concept map of a life cycle of a butterfly. Now, I'll be showing you the different types of weather using a concept map. And last, here's the sample concept map. When the weather is cloudy, we feel gray or dull. When the weather is rainy, we need umbrella. When the weather is windy, we can fly kites. And when the weather is sunny, we feel hot. To structure a concept map exercise for students, you have to follow 3 steps. 1. We have to create a focus questions that clearly specifies the issues that the concept map should address. Second, we have to tell the students, it can be individually or in groups, to begin by generating a list of relevant topics and organizing them before constructing a preliminary map. Third is give the students opportunity to revise. Concept maps evolve as they become more detailed and may require rethinking and reconfiguring it. So let's encourage students to create a map that employ a hierarchical structure that distinguishes concepts and facts at different level of specificity. Draw multiple connections or cross-links that illustrates how ideas in different domains are related and include specific examples of events and objects that clarify the meaning of given concept.
Using concept tests. Concept tests are short, informal, targeted tests that are administered during class to help instructors gauge whether students understand key concepts. They can be used both to assess the students' prior knowledge or their understanding of content in the current course. Usually, these tests consist of 1 to 5 multiple-choice questions. Students are asked to select the best answer and submit it by raising their hands, holding up a color card associated with a response option, or using a remote control device to key in the response. The primary purpose of concept test is to get a snapshot of the current understanding of the class, not of an individual student. As a result, concept tests are usually ungraded or very low stakes. They are most valuable in large classes where it is difficult to assess student understanding in real time. Creating a concept test. Creating a good concept test can be time-consuming, so you might want to see if questions repositories or fully developed concept tests already exist in your field. If you create your own, you need to begin with a clear understanding of the knowledge and skills that you want your students to acquire. The questions should probe a student's comprehension or application of a concept rather than a factual recall. Concept test questions often describe a problem, event, or situation. Examples of appropriate types of questions include asking students to predict the outcome of an event, like what would happen in this experiment, how would changing one variable affects others. Next, asking students to apply rules or principles to new situations. Which concept is relevant here? How would you apply it? Next, asking students to solve a problem using a known equation or select a procedure to complete a new task, like what procedure would be appropriate to solve this problem. The following question stems are used frequently in concept test questions. Which of the following best describes? Which is the best method for? If the value of x was changed to? Which of the following is the best explanation for? Which of the following is another example of? What is the major problem with? Or what would happen if? Implementing concept test. Concept tests can be used in a number of different ways. Some instructors use them at the beginning of class to gauge students' understanding of readings or homework. Some use them intermittently in class to test students' comprehension. Based on how well students perform, the instructors may decide to move on in the lecture or pause to review a difficult concept. Another method is to give students the chance to respond to a question individually, then put them in pairs or small groups to compare and discuss their answers. After a short period of time, the students vote again for the answer they think is correct. This gives students the opportunity to articulate the reasoning for a particular answer. Assessing group work. All the basic principles of assessment that apply to individual students' work apply to group work as well. Assessing group work has additional aspects to consider. First, depending on the objectives of the assignment, both process and product-related skills must be assessed. Second, group performance must be translated into individual grades, which raises issues of fairness and equity. Complicating both these issues is the fact that neither group processes nor individual contributions are necessarily apparent in the final product. Thus, these instructors need to find ways of obtaining this information. The general principles described in the next few sections can be adapted to the content of specific courses. First, assess process, not just product. If both product and process are important to you, both should be reflected in students' grade, although the weight you accord each will depend on your learning objectives for the course and for the assignment. Ideally, your grading criteria should be communicated to students in a rubric. This is specifically important if you are emphasizing skills that students are not used to being evaluated on, such as the ability to cooperate or meet deadlines. Second, ask students to assess their own contribution to team. Have students evaluate their own teamwork skills and their contributions to the group's process using a self-assessment of the process skills you are emphasizing. These process skills may include, among others, respectfully listening and considering opposing views or a monetary option. Effectively managing conflict around differences in ideas or approaches. Keeping the group work on track both during and between meetings. Promptness in meeting deadlines and appropriate distribution of research analysis and writing. Third, hold individuals accountable. To motivate individual students and discourage the free rider phenomenon, it is important to assess individual contributions and understanding as well as group products and processes, in addition to evaluating the work of the group as a whole. Ask individual students to demonstrate their learning. This can be accomplished through independent write-ups, weekly journal entries, content quizzes, or other types of individual assignments. And last, ask students to evaluate their group's dynamics and the contributions of their teammates. Gauge what various group members have contributed to the group, like effort, participation, cooperativeness, accessibility, communication skills, by asking team members to complete an evaluation form for a group process test. This is not a foolproof strategy. Students may feel social pressure to cover for one another. However, When combined with factors promoting individual accountability, it can provide you with important information about the dynamics within groups and the contributions of individual members. Creating and using rubrics. A rubric is a scoring tool that explicitly describes the teacher's performance expectations for an assignment or piece of work. A rubric identifies criteria, the aspect of performance like argument, evidence, clarity that will be assessed, descriptors, the characteristics associated with each dimensions like argument is demonstrable and original, evidence is diverse and compelling. Performance levels, a rating scale that identifies students' level of mastery within each criterion. Rubrics can be used to provide feedback to students on diverse types of assignments, from papers, projects, and oral presentations to artistic performances and group projects. Benefiting from rubrics. A carefully designed rubric can offer a number of benefits to teachers. Rubrics helps teachers to reduce the time spent grading by allowing teachers to refer to a substantive description without writing long comments. Help teachers more clearly identify strengths and weaknesses across an entire class and adjust their instructions appropriately. Help to ensure consistency across time and across graders. Reduce the uncertainty which can accompany grading. And last, discourage complaints about grades. An effective rubric can also offer several important benefits to students. Rubrics help students to understand teachers' expectations and standards, use teachers' feedback to improve their performances, monitor and assess their progress as they work towards clearly indicated goals, and last, recognize their strengths and weaknesses and direct their efforts and accordingly. So I have here sample scoring rubrics. The following basic elementary scoring rubrics provide guidelines to evaluate students' assignments using the following criteria. 10 is the highest and 2 is the lowest. 10, meaning the student's work is exemplary, strong, his or she goes beyond what is expected of them to complete the assignment. 8, meaning the student's work is good, acceptable, so he or she does what is expected of them to complete the assignment. 6, meaning the student's work is satisfactory, almost there but acceptable. He or she may or may not complete the assignment with limited understanding. 4, meaning the student's work is not where it should be or weak. He or she does not complete the assignment and or has no understanding of what to do. And 2, meaning the student's work has a complete lack of understanding of what to do. So here's how to use a scoring rubric. To get started, you must first determine if you are scoring the assignment based on the overall quality and understanding of a concept. If you are, then this is a quick and easy way to score an assignment because you are looking for an overall understanding rather than a specific criteria. Next, read the assignment carefully. Be sure not to look at the rubric yet because right now you are just focusing on the main concept. Reread the assignment while focusing on the overall quality and understanding the student portrays. And last, use the rubric to determine the final score of the assignment. So learn how to score a rubric and view samples of expository and narrative writing rubrics. Plus, learn how to create a rubric from scratch by using this step-by-step guide to create a rubric.